So, okay, um, well, I'm not sure it's going to capture this. Uh, Let me see about that. Or rather, what I will do is, okay, because I've extended the screen, it might be a bit of a challenge to record this other side. I have extended so that it is able to cover the whole screen. Otherwise, if I duplicate, it becomes very small. Okay, but I think let me just go through with this. Then we can be able to see. So I was discussing the issue of subqueries, and I say a subquery is a query within a query. So sometimes you want to use joins, but sometimes join become a little bit too complicated depending on the amount of data you're dealing with. Okay, so in that particular use case, you might want to use a subquery which is much lighter than using a join. So I'll give us an example. Previously, we said if I wanted a movie and I wanted to know who created the movie, I can either use an inner join or an outer join, isn't it? So an inner join will basically allow me to fetch data from all the tables where the fields are matching. Whereas an outer join will get me data from one table and matching data from a separate table. But in this particular case, I want to use the exact same scenario of an outer join, but using a subquery just to demonstrate the difference between subqueries and joins, isn't it? And there, and of course, the use case that we have for it. So initially, we said select all fields from movies to all fields. That's how I write my queries when I want to use joins. Then I'll simply say I want to get the name of the user who added. So if I come to this users table, I have first name and last name. So I can say here concatenate first name, add a space, then last name. Okay? Is it too big? That's still readable, isn't it? So concatenate first name and last name as added by name, isn't it? Then here I'll say from the first table is movie titles as M. Then the other table I would say left. Actually, it's a right outer join. Then I'll join this table called users and I'll give it another view. Then I'll simply put on, then I'll specify the field. So u dot user ID, I can add it down here so that, okay, it's actually down. So let me just add this on at the bottom. U dot user ID will be equals to this m dot added by, I think, isn't it? So it is m dot added by, like that. So that should give me all the movies with whoever added them at the end. That is where it matches. So if I say left, I'll be able to get even the one that doesn't have an author. So that's how to use a join when you're matching when you want to fetch data from two tables, isn't it? But now I wanted to show us the same exact example on how we would use a subquery on the same. So to use a subquery, I'll just comment on this. This screen is small enough. I'm hoping all the code is visible. So it's the same. I'll use the same part of the structure, which is actually not the same. So I can say select movies dot all the fields. I don't even need to say all the movies. Um, since I'm going to be fetching data from one table, it's going to look like this. Select all fields from movies, movie titles, right? So that will give me all my titles like that. But I want to add a column here for the one who added it, isn't it? I want to display the name of whoever added it at the back here. So instead of using a join like this, I'll come here, I'll put a comma, then I'll write a subquery. I'll write a query here inside bracket. So subqueries are usually written inside a bracket. So I'll say added by name. That's the title that's going to appear for it, isn't it? So now inside here, I just write the query that I want. So I'll simply say select, and most subqueries will have select. Then I'll put this uh, item here, this So I'll put that. Okay. Then I'll say from this table called users, where now this way I need to an alias. So I'll use this one as M. I don't need an alias here for users, but I can put it if I need to. So I'll simply say where the column called user ID is equals to M dot added by. Okay. So that's my subquery. Let's shrink it a bit. That's still readable, isn't it? Is it? That's still readable, isn't it? Yeah, so I have said select all fields from movie titles, but then I'm putting a subquery inside here. So I'm saying select, go into a table called users and join first name with the space and last name, where the user ID in that table is equals to this movie's title dot added by. So that should be able to give me the same exact effect as what I had here. But now instead of using a join over here, I have used a subquery instead. Now remember, I said the subquery can only return one value. And this is going to be important because if you look at it keenly, I only have one user who is able to add move, isn't it? So if I return the subquery, then it means that it's only going to return one value. If it was returning more than one value, then it actually give you an error. So those are the two caveats you need to understand. One, returns a single value, and two, it can only return it returns a single column. Then two, it can only return one value. Those are the only two constraints you have with this subquery. So let's run it and see how it works or if it works. And as you can see, yes, it works. Okay, so I have added by system administrator user support. This one doesn't have because I don't have ID number 5 for here, so this will return null because I'm not finding that ID. So subqueries will return null, and as I said, it is an equivalent to a left outer join in this particular case. Now, you will use them sparingly depending on use cases, particularly. I prefer joins rather than subqueries, but there are some scenarios that you might not want to avoid the subqueries. Okay? Kuna swali? I think that's straightforward, isn't it? Good. So let's look at something else called views. We also have views. A view is basically a virtual table. It is a table that does not exist. So it means that it is a table that you build from other tables. Okay. Now we introduce views to reduce complexity on queries. Like for example, if I was to write this SQL statement, this is an average statement. Actually, this is a very tiny statement. If I show you a proper statement, you'll be amazed how complex some of these queries would look like. Okay. Now, to avoid that complexity, actually, let me just give you one so that you're able to see what it actually looks like. Um, well, I thought I had. Okay. Let me just bring it up. So, if I come to actually what I was working on right before I came here, it's called what? P. Yeah, see here. So if I get you a query like get, um, like this is how the query would look like. So you can see, okay, this is actually just one table. I have one with multiple tables. Let me say get jobs, get salary structure or something else. Are you seeing something like a salary structure here? This one. So ideally, this is how your query would look like. Um, I guess this is how your query would look like. So I have one table, two tables, three tables, four tables, and so on and so on. So I can have so many tables within the query itself, isn't it? Just to be able to get the data that I need, isn't it? Now, this could be way too complex for an average person, like a normal user, to be able to comprehend exactly what's going on. But at the same time, you want to hide the details as to you want to hide the details as to how the query is constructed. So you want to use a view. So what the user will see is basically the results and not the query itself. That's what you use a view for. Okay, so every time I want users to be able to extract data from the database and I want them to use that data to perform things like reporting and all that, I will write for them a view which will now give them the results of what they intend to have, and then it removes the complexity of actually how the SQL statement was constructed. So it could be from 10 different tables, and it could be a very complex relationship, isn't it? There's cardinality on one side, there's a left outer join, there's a right inner join, there is grouping, and you will do a host of so many other things to be able to get that data in a particular format and fashion, isn't it? So for that application, you realize that now you will need to be able to perform other elements altogether. Okay, and that's why now views come into play. So views allow you to hide the complexity of the query itself, and at the same time, it gives you a virtual table. So it's sort of like create a table virtually within your database, and you can be able to query that table as we move along. Are we together at that point? So let's look at how we create views. So to create view, simply it's a very simple statement. I'll use whatever we have over here. I want to create a view based on this. I want to create a view based on this. So, well, I'll create it from scratch so that we're able to see what works and what doesn't. So I'm going to create a view. If you're using a SQL Log like me over here, it's as simple as saying create view, and it will give you the template for creating a view. Otherwise, you can just write it from scratch. Okay? So to write it from scratch, I'll create a new query over here. I'll increment the size a bit. Then what you need to do is say create view. Then you give the view name, view, movie, title, with users. The user will create it, of course, isn't it? Then views don't have parameters. You say as. Then you type your SQL statement down there. Okay? So the statement would be something like select m dot all fields, concatenate first name, space, last name. Then I'll give those one a column as added by name. I don't have a way of wrapping this text. Well, probably not, but let me just put it on a new line. Or there as added by name. Then I'll simply say from. I want to get this data from movies table, movie titles. Movie titles has an alias of m, and then, well, I want to use a left outer join on users. Is it users or user? As u on u dot user ID is equals to m dot added by. It's the exact same query I typed on the side. I've just decided to type it all over again. Okay? I've just decided to type it all over again, but this is the exact same query that we have over here. It's the exact same query. Okay? So I have that. So I can highlight this and run it and see if it gives me any results. So it gives me problems. So property manager, I should choose switch to my database here called movies. Movies. Then that should work. Yeah, that should work. Okay. So I have it like that. Now, this is left out a join. So it means I have a movie that doesn't have a title. So if the title is not there, I'll use a function called if null or is null. There's a function called if null. There's a Scala function called if null or is null, which allows me to be able to put some default value over here in it. So I'll simply say unavailable. Okay, so I can say here if null, but you can still use is null, whichever is good for you. Is null is the standard one. Is null works on both SQL Server, Oracle, and MySQL. But if null works specifically for MySQL, so I'll simply say if null. If this field is null, then what do you do? Put a text here, say unavailable. So let me just put it down here so that you're able to read it nicely. Then I close there if null. So if this query returns null, then I'll put the following string and say unavailable, like that, okay? So if I run this query, um, if null concat, yeah, so this one should be after alias. Yeah, that should be there. Sorry, spelling syntax error. That should work. Now, this is an alias. An alias comes after your null function, okay? Because the alias is basically what I'm labeling the data to be, isn't it? So I have to perform all my operations before I put an alias, okay? So if I do like that, then it means when I come to this over here, now you can see this is unavailable. So I'm no longer outputting null, but I'm giving a user, some useful information that they can be able to use it. When you're reporting, you just don't return null values and all these kinds of things to the user. You try to structure your queries in such a way that they are a little bit more useful to the end user, okay? In terms of the information they contain. So now that I have this, now I can go ahead and create view. What I'm doing is I have simply highlighted this so that I'm able to test before I actually create the view. Okay? Otherwise, you don't want to create the view when it has mistakes. You want to write your query, you want to test them and see that they return the correct thing, then you create the view. Okay? Now it's also possible some people would enclose the entire SQL query into a bracket like that, and that is also allowed. Okay, so you can say as, then the entire query is enclosed in normal brackets. So that's allowed. And actually, if you look at most syntaxes in most editors, that is what they would recommend. But even without the brackets, it will still be able to work out. Okay. Now again, I don't like putting brackets overly, but because that structure works like that, we can leave it at that, isn't it? So if I was to run this query, it will create a view. So usually I like seeing success here, so it means that everything is successful. So it means that I've created a view. So now if I come to this views folder over here, let me just refresh this. If I come to this property manager, I'm supposed to look at movies. Movies is here. If I now come to views, you can see now I have a view. And I can create as many as possible. Now, how do we query a view? It's as simple as writing a select statement, but replacing the table name with the view name. So if I wanted to get the data from the view, I can simply come here, write a new query, and simply say select all fields, and I can even rearrange them depending on how I want them, because a view, as we have said, is a virtual table, isn't it? So I can still be able to arrange them in the order around. But for now, I want to select all of them just to show us that it actually works. And I click that. Sorry, from syntax is important. Select all fields from a table or a view. Then I simply highlight that, and you can be able to see it works and it's able to give me that data. Now, for the end user, this is where they're getting their data and not that. So that's the complexity that I was talking about. You want to be able to reduce complexity as far as your queries are concerned. Okay, so make it very easy for your end user to be able to gather that information. Okay, so now if I was to tell you just do this, if I wanted to get all movies that were added by user two, I can still come here and say where added by is equals to 2. And you'll see it actually is still able to work just like a normal query. Added by, do I have a column called added by really? Let me see. I've misspelled. Oh, I missed D. Yeah, I thought so. So when I say added by 2, you can see now it gives me the ones that were added by 2. Okay? So if I say added by is equals to null, that will not work out. Why? Null is not a value, so you cannot equate null like this. If I wanted null values, I'll simply say where is null, added by, replace null with a zero, then I put a, or where is null double L. So this is one way of doing it. That will give me the null values. If null, sometimes it has issues with the is now function, I don't know why. So you can see here I don't have the person who added. Okay, so what I'll do is whenever there's a null value, put a zero, then equate to a zero. That's one of the ways that you use whenever you want to evaluate null values, because null is not an actual value. It is nothing. It is zilch. It is vacuum, isn't it? So you cannot compare vacuum to anything. So what I'm saying, if it is a vacuum, replace it with a zero, then check if that value that you return is equals to a zero, then you're able now to be able to filter null value. So again, these scalar functions are going to be very, very important. As you can see, when we're writing our queries and you're moving along, they help us in shaping how our queries are going to look like. Okay. I want to make them uppercase, I want to make them lowercase, I want to format them in two decimal places, I want to change the formats and all these kind of things. They help us in achieving those things easily so that by the time we're getting our data back to the end user, it is already formatted nicely and we don't need to do any other additional work from there. So that is a view, how you create it. And by the way, it can be as complex as a query. I can add where clauses here, I can add group by, sum, order by, and all those kinds of stuff. I can be able to add them so long as the query returns results. That's what's important. Okay? The only challenge with views is that they don't accept parameters, unlike stored procedures, which you're going to see in a short while. Views don't accept parameters. So it is a table. It's more like you're creating a virtual table, and as you can see, it sits actually inside your database engine. So the good thing is that when you create a view, it is cached. So your database engine already knows how it is fetching data, how it is sorting data, how it is filtering that data, and so forth and so forth. So it becomes a little bit faster in terms of execution also. Okay? Any question on views? Any question on views? As I said, you're going to use a lot of these things for the project that you're doing, okay? So make sure you understand them and know how to use them, know how and when to use them. Now, don't overly use views. They can make your uh, database a little bit slow, and especially when you have very complex queries. Okay, if you want to query a view with another table, then it becomes overly complicated. But if you want to query the view itself, then it's slightly faster. Okay, so don't overly use them. Use them sparingly, depending on the complexity. And in most cases, personally, I create them for purposes of my end users. When my end users want to extract data from the database, I simply create them for them a view, then I allow them to filter the view. Now, they don't need to go through the complication of how that data looks like at the background. Okay, so even if I join 10 tables, what they're going to see is one result set which they can query, order, group, and do all sorts of things that they want to use. So we move to the next thing. All right, so besides views, so we have talked about tables, we have talked about views. Let's talk about something that is going to be very, very critical during our application development, and they're called stored procedures. Databases or enterprise databases, most of them support stored procedures. And stored procedure is basically I write this query, I store it inside my database, then I can call it to execute some tasks over and over again. So I don't need to repeat myself on the query, isn't it? And that's a good thing. Say, for example, I wanted to create a movie. I want to write a query that inserts a movie into the database. So every time I want to insert a movie, I'll simply say insert into, isn't it? Then I specify the field names, then I specify the values that I want to attach, isn't it? And I have to repeat that cycle every other time I want to add a movie. That is, first of all, tedious. Then number two, it does not scale up very, very well. Number three, it is also not very secure. And number four, it is very, very slow. Okay? Now, when I use stored procedure or stored procedures, I get the benefits of writing the benefits that the raw queries don't give me. One, stored procedures are cached, which means when you run it the first time, the database engine picks it and creates what we call an execution plan. So it knows exactly which table this thing accepts, isn't it? How it manages the indexes, if you're generating IDs, how you're going to sort it, how it's supposed to lock it, and so forth and so forth. So next time you execute it, it already knows exactly what it's supposed to do. So you find that when you run a stored procedure, it is almost 100 times faster than writing the raw query itself. And that's how we use them. That's one advantage. Speed. Of course, the other one is scalability. If I write a stored procedure here, now, whether I write this application on PHP or later on I decide to write it on Node, I will not change the logic that is happening on the database side. Okay? So the way I do my query has got nothing to do with the backend, which is the mid layer. Either it's PHP or Node.js or Ruby or C Sharp or Java or whatever it is. It is standard across board, so that makes it very, very scalable. Then number three, it is secure because as you're going to see, every time we create a stored procedure, it means that we are going to be, it means that we are going to be, sorry, let me just hang up on this. We're going to have a user who is able to execute that stored procedure. Now, in the event that there's a security breach, I simply go and change the password of that particular user, and I have disconnected the database from any other application that was using it. Okay? Then, of course, number four is simplicity. When you write stored procedures, whenever you want to call them, it's just saying, call this stored procedure, you give it the parameters, and it is able to do what it's supposed to do, and you are home and dry. Okay? Now, stored procedures are going to be based on the SQL queries that we have looked at. Okay? You can select, you can insert, you can update. Actually, I forgot to discuss insert and update, to discuss update and delete, but probably maybe let me look at the stored procedures, then I can look at them later. I was supposed to look at them last time, but I think when I was doing my notes, I kind of like forgot about it. But I just the brief is that you're able to see how it works out. So that's what stored procedures are. They are functions. Actually, we have stored procedures and we have functions. The difference is that a stored procedure does not return a value per se. You can actually return a table, but it does not return a single value per se. Okay? Whereas functions will return a value. Okay? And we're going to see how that works out. We're going to see the two of them and actually how they come into play. Are you together? So let's look at stored procedures. Now, as just like creating views, you simply say create procedure, then you provide the name of the procedure, then you provide the parameters, then now you write your query. Now, I have a smaller table here called users. Let's create a stored procedure that will allow us to add users and test it and see how that works out. So here I have user ID, first name, middle name, and last name. It's as simple as that. Of course, I know I should have password, email, mobile, number, and all those kind of stuff, whether the user is active or not, and all this kind of stuff. I'm particularly in your table, I'm assuming you're going to have more of a list than that, right? But for my use case, I simply have this simple structure which I want to use to demonstrate how stored procedures would work. Now, when it comes to usability, I like using this interface, which is SQL Yolk a lot because it simplifies the work for me. For example, if I want to create a stored procedure and I'm not sure, let me just check if this column is auto-generated. So I'll alter. I'll just check if user ID is auto-increment, which is perfect. So I'll make it a primary key also. So it's auto-increment. So I want user ID to be automatic. So I'm only inserting three fields: username, first name, and last name. Okay. So let's see how that works out. So I want to create a stored procedure over here. So, well, I can get rid of this, isn't it? I can use this. So I say create procedure. Then I'll give the procedure a name. Okay. Let's call it SP add user, isn't it? Then I'll open a bracket. Then I'll give it the parameters. Okay, for adding the user. So I will need username, which is variable character 50. So let me put this on a new line. Then I'll also need first name, which is also variable character 50. Then I also have last name, which is variable character at assume 50. So I'm assuming all those are all the parameters I need, like that. So I have create procedure that. Then down here, I can come and say begin. Then I say end up here, isn't it? Well, that's totally not necessary, but it's a good thing to have. Okay. So I can go ahead and start typing my query over here. Now, what I will do is usually, I create a stored procedure to do insert and update at the same time. Insert means I create a new record. Update means I am changing records of existing. I'm changing details of existing record. Okay. So, well, in your case, you might use different one. I'll just like combining them so that I don't have way too many queries because they do the exact same thing. One just inserts, the other one just updates. Okay. But let me just use this one for purposes of insertion. So here I can come and say insert. Then I'll specify the table, which is users. Then I'll specify the field names. Then I'll specify the values. So I'll put my columns inside here. So you come to users, it has username, comma, first name, comma, last name. Now, if I was writing a straight query, I would have put my values inside, isn't it? But because the stored procedure has parameters, username, first name, and last name, now I'll pass the parameters down here. Okay? So I'll say here, username, then I'll say first name, then I'll say last name. Then I'll put a semicolon at the end of this. Now that's the basic structure of how you write a stored procedure. Now, of course, depending on the environment and the version of MySQL you're using, this query might not work out of the box as it is. Okay? This might not work out of the box. I'll try it. I know sometimes that there are delimiters that we have to put. Sometimes you have to enclose it on a begin, end section, and so forth and so forth. So I'll try it, and if it doesn't work, we're going to add the other parameters so that we make it work. Okay? But if you are writing straight up SQL in SQL Server or Oracle or Sybase or even Postgres and all that. Generally, this structure should allow it to work. And but as I said, we have a bit of syntax issues when we move from one environment to another. This is the standard way of writing it, and everything should work right out of the box. Okay. Now, if it doesn't work as I've said, we're going to go back and fix it so that now we give the structure that it wants so that it's able to work right out of the box. So I'll try to run that, and you can see it is actually successful. Now, that would work. Now, I've gotten the query. How do we use it? Okay? Let's create three users and see if it works. So I have my users table over here. Uh, it's here. It has two users. I want to create three more. Okay? So what I would do is I would come here and I would say call. In MySQL, you have to use call. Okay? In SQL Server and Oracle, you don't need to use the word call. Just give the name of the stored procedure and the parameters, and it will be able to do the rest. In MySQL, you must provide the word call. Okay. Now, those are the subtle differences that you'll get between different environments as you are doing these particular activities. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll call the stored procedure, this one, and I'll give it the values. So the value username, I'll say I want to call Richard. It's a text. The second value I'll say is Richard with capital R. And the last name is Kello, like that. So that's all I did. I only put these ones down here just to show you that these are the variables that you're adding. But ideally, this is how I would call the stored procedure. Okay? So I'll say call stored procedure, add user, then I give the three parameters, and if I highlight this and execute, I should be able to see success over here. And if I come back to my table, I should be able to see Richard has been added. And that is how you would do it 99% of the time. In short, I'm not expecting you to go into Java or PHP or whichever backend you want to use and write your queries over there. I want you to write them inside stored procedure so that it is very transparent to your backend. Your backend does not know exactly what the database is doing. All it knows is I need to call a stored procedure X with these values and it's able to do the work itself. Why is that important? As I said, security. SQL injection cannot happen in this particular. By the way, I'm hoping you know what SQL injection is. SQL injection cannot be affected with this. So taken care of, I've taken care of all these parameters to ensure that my database is secure. So everything that comes from the stored procedure is treated as a variable. Okay? So I cannot come and say, add this Richard is part of the executable statement. Whatever I pass as Richard here, the entire thing is treated as a variable. Okay? So that makes my code very secure. But at the same time, if I wanted to add another user, I'll simply call this, and now I say maybe I want to add Robert Nestomale. So I'll say Robert here, and I'll say Robert, and I'll say here Mali, and I just execute this. And it will be successful if I come back to my database. I'm seeing it is added. Okay? Is there a question up to that point? This is how I would work. This there are so many ways of skinning a cat. This is how I would like you to be skinning it. Because this way, now what happens is that query the way I've run it, even if I was to run it 10 million times, the database engine would not feel anything. It already knows what it needs to do. It already knows how it locks it. It already knows if I'm going to fetch this data, how to sort it, and all those kinds of things. Now, what would happen here if I run this query again? Of course, it will replicate that data, right? How do you take care of that? Now I'm just trying to make you see the power of stored procedures. There are things that I can be able to do internally on the database itself without even involving the back end or the front end. Okay, like validation. If I wanted to add data, I wanted to validate this data. How would that actually work out? So if I want to insert data, I can come and modify this stored, but then I can just come and say alter this stored procedure. Of course, you know how to alter it. I can say alter this stored procedure, then I change the statements. Okay. Where because I already have the tools here that allow me to do it, let me not also bother so much with writing the scripts. So you might go ahead and learn how to do it, but most of the time, as a pro, you would hardly be writing the entire script. Actually, when creating the stored procedure, I usually don't write create procedure, then I give the value. I simply generate a stored procedure, what do you call it? I generate a stored procedure uh, template, then I simply fill in the values and I'm good to go. It's much easier that way. But of course, as we are learning, it's important for us to be able to know exactly how the syntax flows from top to bottom. Okay? Again, it's just like knowing how to write. First, we start with writing all the letters, but we have spell checker and word fillers and so on, which allows us to be able to type very fast in it. But for the starters, we need to be able to know exactly how this works out. Okay, so let me alter the stored procedure and validate. So you can see it has added a few things. It has added a delimiter. It has specified which database to use. Now here it's telling me if it exists, it should drop it. Then you can see it has created a definer here who is root, the person who is currently logged in. This is the person who is able to execute this stored procedure, and this is the server that is accessing. So I started with create and I go to procedure like that. So you can see there are other things that it has added. Sorry, the other things that it has added down here for me. Okay, so again, every time you do that, the engine will automatically fill in it for you. Okay, but that is the actual structure on how it's supposed to look like. As I said, don't kill yourself with that structure. Just say create procedure, give this procedure a name, and by the way, when you're giving them a name, it must start with a letter, and it cannot contain spaces. Okay, or special characters like dollar sign, minus, multiplication, and any special characters, the art symbol, and all this kind of stuff. It should not be able to contain those. So just like you're doing regular programming in any other programming language, consider this part of that. Okay, so as I specify the name, then I specify the field names. Now I'm using dollar sign. It's not necessary for you to use dollar sign, but I'm using dollar sign because I'll be using PHP, and PHP uses dollar sign to define variables. So I want my variables to be consistent on the server side and on the PHP side. So my PHP variables are also going to look exactly the same, right? So here I'm just trying to be consistent beforehand. Now you can use anything else like user.name or okay, dot is not allowed. User underscore name is allowed. Just make sure that the field name and the values are different, so you can be able to tell the difference between the two. Okay. So for me, using the dollar sign makes the whole difference for me. Dollar sign means that is the variable, and without the dollar sign, that means that's the field name. Okay. Now, if I wanted to make sure that I cannot duplicate data, I will use another function here called if exists, or rather if not exists. Okay, so I can say if not exists. Basically, this will allow you to run a subquery, and that's why I talked about subqueries. So that now, if that subquery does not return any results, then this statement below here will execute, isn't it? So if not exists, so I'll simply come here and say select all fields from this table called users, where the username is equals to this username that I provided, then execute this statement. Of course, you have to put a then here, then execute the following statement. You can have this down here, execute this statement, then you end if. So if whatever is here does not exist, which means it does not return any value, then execute this. If it returns any values, don't execute it. That's logic, isn't it? You've done control, you've done control structures in programming, and one of them is selection, isn't it? So you execute code based on some predefined condition, isn't it? So that's exactly what I want to do here. I want to check if I run this query and there are no results, then I insert. Others, if there are results, I've told it to do nothing, isn't it? So I'll run this again. I want to say down here success. Well, I have an error, so it tells me that right to use and if. So I forgot to put a semicolon here. Very, very important. Every time you're writing queries inside MySQL, make sure that your query terminates with a semicolon. Okay? So it's just the standard SQL. I'll try it again. Usually I want to see success with no errors. Warnings are fine because I already dropped this dot procedure and I'm trying to drop it again. So probably it does not find it and that's why it's giving me a warning. So warnings are not bad. Errors are what you want to make sure are non-existent. Okay? So again, as you're writing your queries, most importantly, I'm using errors. So what I will do is, once since I already have this in place, I have Richard repeated here, as you can see. Richard is ID number 3 and 5. So if I try to run the query again with Richard, I probably should sit at number 6, isn't it? So let's go back to where we have that and run this query again. It tells me successful, but if I come to my database, you can see it's not added. But if I put Richard 1, that is going to be different. Then we're supposed to create a new one. Come back to my table and check that. Now you can see I have it. So there are those controls that I can be able to have within even the database itself to protect the data as it is being added. Okay. Remember, I want to make sure that my database is validated and it is almost independent as it possibly could be as far as the user interface or the backend is concerned. That's why we define primary keys. That's why we define foreign keys. That's why we put the correct data type. That's why we put these controls like check new data exists before we add and so forth and so forth. So all those things we are doing to make sure that whatever happens to this database, when you expose it to a particular environment and the programmers at the back are careless enough, at least we have taken care of some security within our ourselves. Are we together? I hope it's not that complicated. Straightforward, isn't it? Okay, what's complicated? I mean, these are the exact same things I was doing the other time. The only thing I've introduced is create an import stored procedure, but in terms of the queries themselves, I'm basically using the things that we had learned the other time. The only difference is instead of putting values here, now I'm using parameters which I am collecting from the stored procedure. You will thank me later. Trust me. You write your code like this, the maintenance is almost nil. You don't have issues with SQL injection, with speed, with scalability, and all this kinds of stuff. So you write your code once, and it will probably run for another 5 years before somebody starts asking you for very complex things. I don't know now. The data has gone to 1 million. Now your system is extremely slow. You're not going to get such. Okay. You try writing that SQL query inside your Android or your PHP, then that data goes to 100,000, and you see how the application is going to behave like. Okay? Like they say, this is IBL, industrial based learning. I'm telling you what you need to go and see in the industry. If you went to Safaricom right now, or Microsoft, or Google, or any other thing, this is exactly what you'll be doing. Okay? Can I go on? Or do I let you practice? I know you like the recorded part. The only problem I have with that is that I was trying to monitor how you guys are doing the videos, and I'm like, these people are looking at it at an average of 10 minutes, okay? Which, well, that doesn't scale up very well. Yeah, you can do it at your comfort. That's okay, but usually it's good to go through it, then maybe go through it another time. Then maybe once you go through the third time, now I'm not supposed to be having challenges with things like this. Okay? Now, personally, I don't like videos, but they are also good because you can review it over and over again. That's the advantage you have. But the problem, as I said, that I have with you guys is that even your concentration is almost minimal. Okay, and I did that on purpose just to see if that arrangement would be able to work out. Okay, so I found out that it actually doesn't work out. Because if you're looking at it at an average, yeah, of course, technically, maybe you've looked at it from end to end, but you've looked at it 5 times, okay, at intervals of 20 minutes, okay? So I don't know if your level of concentration is just 20 minutes or it can stretch slightly above that, okay? But it's good. Well, I'll try and record them for your reference, but kindly, please try as much as possible. If I record it, just go through it. Okay? I know there's no interaction when I'm recording them because I'm technically just now that's an actual lecture. I'm technically lecturing. So whether you get it or not is not a big deal. But usually I like people understanding what I'm doing. By the way, I have not crammed anything here. I have understood how it works. And I want you to understand how it works. Don't cram the syntax like he said that for you to create a stored procedure, it is delimiter dollar sign, then use, then I want to cram it. I just want to understand it. Well, the syntax is standard. It will be create procedure, open bracket, I put my parameters and data types, then I put my query below it. That's as simple as it is, isn't it? Now, the details of how to create the query will depend on exactly what you want. Okay? So that is creating, and you can. I've shown us how to create it, and I've shown us how to call it, and we have checked how to modify it and make it now not do the things that we don't want it to do, isn't it? So even if my front end engineers were careless enough not to check if a user exists in order to create a new user, I will have taken care of it from my end. So you will not be able to bloat my database with very useless data, so to speak. Okay? Now, that is inserting data. How do we extract data using stored procedures? Okay? The structure is exactly the same. The only thing that's going to change is probably the type of query. So instead of insert, probably I'll use select. Okay? But again, we looked at this last time, and I tried as much as possible to explain what select is because, again, 75% of the queries you're going to write will be select. Trust me. I have done this for the last 20 years, and I'll tell you 80% of the queries I have written are select. 80%. The other 20% is insert, update, and delete. The other 80% is select, getting data. We put data in the database once. Once we put it there, we use it for different other things, right? So I'll use it for 100 different things, but I only inserted it once. Once I create a movie, that's it. Next time I want to do rating, I want to display it, I want to, check the status and all these kind of things. They're all basically just select statements as I move along. Okay? So let's look at how we can write another stored procedure that allows us to be able to get the users within our database. So there are two things I can do. Let me first of all write a stored procedure without variables. The one I wrote here has some variables, as you can see. I want to write one that gives me all the users, isn't it? So if I want to get all the users, well, I can come to this query over here. Where is it? This one. I think there are way too many. Yeah. I can remove this. Huh? Well, because I'm not going to save them anyway, let me just remove it because I don't have use for them after this class. So if I wanted to get all the users, I'll simply say create procedure sp get all users. I'm using SP to know that it's a stored procedure. So SP means stored procedure. Okay? And as I said, you cannot have special characters other than the underscore. So the underscore allows me to be able to know that this stored procedure called get all users. I cannot have another function. Of course, I can't have another function called get all users because that would not be able to work out, as we're going to see when you're looking at functions. Then once I'm done here, I need to put an open and closing bracket so that my parameters goes inside there. Parameters are not a must, they are optional. Okay? So then I can come down here and now write my query. So I'll simply say select all fields from users. Then I can now arrange them alphabetically, isn't it? Maybe say order by first name, then last name. I can do anything I want. This query over here, it can be any query that you want to run. Okay, I'm just making them simple for now so that we see how it works out. So once I'm done with that, I simply terminate with a semicolon and I go and execute. That should be able to create it. Success, it has created it. Again, as I've said, the engine will fill in most of the details for you. Like you can see, it has added quite a bit of things. Create definer, blah blah blah. So what I did is basically just that. So it has added this delimiter, which is here to terminate the entire statement. So the delimiter here I'm using is for the stored procedure is dollar sign, but technically when I was writing it, I terminated it with a semicolon up here, isn't it? Up here, I terminated with a semicolon. But that is the structure of how it will do it inside a stored procedure. Again, as I say, don't sweat yourself over it. Just understand exactly how we're supposed to add it. Where is it? Well, I don't know why it was done to, but just understand how it's supposed to add it. So what I've done is up to here, then I terminated this particular portion with a semicolon, and I didn't even have this. It automatically filled it in for me. Okay? So now let's call this and see how it works out. So I'll just keep on copy this, come to maybe say a query it over here, and I'll simply just say call. You can see now I have not provided any parameters because I don't expect any, but if I run this, you'll see that it has given me all my users, and you can see they are alphabetically arranged based on first name and last name. Are we together? And that is what we will do over and over and over again. So you can see I'm writing the stored procedure and I am testing if it is working. If it is not working, I go and fix it. By the time I'm going back to my front end or my back end, which is PHP, I know that for sure there is no issue with my database. It works right out of the box perfectly. I'm doing this because once you get out of this place, you can learn a job to be anything. You can be the database administrator. So this is going to be your job. You could be a backend engineer. You could be doing this and PHP and so on. So, or you can be full stack, which means you're doing everything else. But whatever the case is, I want you to be able to do them independent of each other and also be able to connect all of them as a single unit. Okay? Excellent. Can I go on? Yes? Can I carry on? Or you'd like to practice? Yeah, I know sometimes programming is a very abstract component, but as you can see, it's not. It's not. They're not that difficult. I'll repeat that again. It's not difficult if you understand what it's supposed to do. That's basically it. Okay. I don't want you to cram it. I don't want you to cram the logic that I'm using. I want you to understand how, and that's why I was asking you to do your own database. Do your own database, do your own fields, do your own relationships, then I know what connects everything, isn't it? When I want to extract data, I've shown us how to use joins. You can use either inner joins or outer joins, or you can use Cartesian joins, where I was using the equal to sign, isn't it, for equijoins. However, you want to return the data. The most important thing is I know what is stored where, and if I need to fetch this data, how do I join the tables to be able to get the data? That is what is important. Now I can go ahead and create a view if I don't want to write these queries over and over again, or if I was querying a movie and I wanted all the details inside a particular view, I can write a view, then all my queries will be based on that particular view. Okay, so it makes it a little bit easier for you in terms of managing the data that you have within your database itself. By the way, you can still be able to query a view inside a stored procedure. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to get all the movies and maybe I wanted them by a particular user, I can actually create a stored procedure that queries uh, this particular uh, this particular view. So again, I can right click here and say create view, create stored procedure, then I give the name. It will give me the syntax, okay? And technically, that's what I do. Again, because you're in class, I'll not do that. I just rewrite it over and over again. As you can see, it's not that difficult. It's just a little bit wordy, but it's not that difficult. Okay? So if you have SQL, just right click, create new view, give it a name like SP, get all movies. It will give you the exact syntax without of comments. So just remove the comments and you're good to go. Then just fill in your exact query down here and your parameters up here if you have the parameters. That's the nice thing about it. But again, this is, as you can see, a more elaborate structure. What I showed you was much, much simpler. And again, as I said, the engine will fill in for you whatever you have left out. Okay? The engine is bright enough, it knows what to fill in for you so that that becomes complete. Remember, the what I said was what the syntax I gave you is standard across almost all major platforms. So Oracle will fill in its own, SQL Server will fill in its own, Sybase will fill in its own, Postgres will fill in its own, MySQL will fill in its own, so that now it becomes a complete query. But that structure that I showed you, the simple structure, is how the ANSI standard for a query or a stored procedure looks like. Okay, so let's create that with this query. Then probably I think I can let you be able to practice after that. Okay, so I'll remove this. I'll just close this. I'll come back to my query here. Where is it here? That's a little too much. So I'll simply say create procedure, and I'll simply say ASP get all movies. I might want to filter the movie by title, isn't it? Might want to filter a movie by title. So maybe give it a few characters, get movie, or rather, instead of say get, let me say filter movie. So I want to filter movie, and I want to give you the title, part of the title, isn't it? So I'll simply say here, title. Then this is going to be variable character. So in short, type a few characters, then get me movies that match the characters that I've given, isn't it? We did this last time. We said you can do pattern matching, you can do exact match, you can use comparison operators, whatever it is you want to do. I'm just trying to show us how we tie it all together. Okay. So for the movie, I'll put the title down here like that. I like putting it like that so that now you're able to see exactly where your variables are. Okay, your variables are usually in a straight line, so I'm able to see these are my variables. Okay, now the engine does not care about the white space. If you put them on one line, it will still be able to read it correctly. Okay, but for your case, you want to put them in separate lines so that I'm able to tell that I defined this and this and this and this, so that if there's something that I left out, I can see it right off the bat, isn't it? If they're one straight line, you might not be able to see it. Of course, unless you get used to it, and then it becomes a little bit easy for you. So then here, I'll simply say select all fields. I'll pick it now from my view. Okay, I'll pick from my view. Then I want to search where movie title. I think we have movie title. Yeah, movie title. How do I search the movie title? We said it has to look something like this, isn't it? Something like that, yeah? It should look something like that. Of course, I know I don't have Titanic, so let me just get the one that I have so that we look, we see how it works. I don't have Titanic so far in my database, so I'll execute that. And I have wounds. So if I say wounds, that should give me only one movie. Uh, is it called movie title or is that movie title? Movie title. Oh, I've missed here like syntax error. Supposed to be like that. So you can see it gives me exit wounds because I've searched wound. So if I want something else like brief, like maybe man, I put here man, and it get me all the movies that contains the word man. So I have Spider-Man, right? So how do I fix this with this variable? Because remember, I need to have this, then the variable that I passed, then this. How do I fix that? I'll use the concatenate function. So I'll say concat. We have done this several times. I'll concat this and my variable and that one. So this variable here becomes my title, like that. So I'll put it down here so that it looks nicer. I'll close this. I'll put it like that. So of course I'll terminate with a semicolon. This would work, but of course I can't test this because this is a variable and there's no variable over here. Okay? So I've tested with actual values and it works, but I know this one will combine this and whatever provided and this to form one string, then that is what will be compared to the movie title. Okay? So I can come back and now execute this. I should see it is successful. Then when I call this filter movie, and I give it some words, it should just allow me, I can just test it down here, no big deal. So I'll simply say call, stored procedure, then I'll give it a value, so I'll say wound. It should return for me exit wounds, and you can see it does that. So if I say Spider-Man, I put here man, it should be able to return Spider-Man. And I can go on and on and on. So in short, when it comes to writing these queries, what's very important is not even the structure of the query itself. It is the query that you want to write. And of course, these other small details like passing variables and concatenating them to be able to, because you need to know how it would look like first of all, so that you can now be able to see how to construct it with variables and other placeholders that you need to have in place and things like that. Okay? Kuna swali? I know that is quite something, and you need to wrap your head around that. But ideally, that is what we do. You can see I'm trying to make my database as independent as possible from my PHP, or if I'm going to use Node, or if I'm going to use Ruby on Rails, or if I'm going to use C Sharp or Java. It doesn't really matter what I'm going to use at the mid layer. The database should be able to do most of its activities almost independently. Of course, it requires these other edges to be able to provide the parameters, okay? Because the user will interact with it, then the user will provide the values, then click on save, then I pick the values and you pass them over to the stored procedure, then it does whatever it needs to do, okay? So the whole point is it should be able to work on its own, but at the end of the day, once we integrate it with the other portions of the other suites of the application, I'm supposed to be able now to move in a much greater detail for these other elements. Okay? I didn't know an hour and a half was that short. Yeah? Now, you can ask me any questions you have. You can ask me any question that you have. But that is clear, isn't it? It takes practice for information. It takes practice. So you can see me do it over and over again. That's not a big deal. I can do it the whole day over and over again. If you don't practice, probably you might never master it. Okay? So you have to try it out. And you'll make errors. I know it looks like I'm typing this code without errors. It's probably because I know what to type and how to locate errors. For your case, it may not be as straightforward as that. Okay? Remember, even a small spelling as just forgetting the like is a big deal, as you've seen, isn't it? It's only that now I already know how to use it very well, so it becomes a little bit easier for me to read the errors and just fix them along. And that is essentially what this IPL is all about. As you're writing your code, you want to write it efficiently, but whenever you run into problems, you want to also be able to fix them right off the bat. Right? Excellent. So I think I'll take a break at that. I will let you practice on that. In fact, I don't know if it is able to record this. I'll check it as recorded and upload it uh, on YouTube so you can be able to have access to it. If not, probably maybe we might need to run it over again. Now, I online is good because I am able to record it comfortably from wherever I am. But the problem I have is that when I make it online, most of you don't want to show up. That's the problem. Okay, so that's why I prefer physical, so that one-on-one interaction also becomes very, very important for me. Okay, so I think I'll take a break at that. If you have any question, then you can reach out to me. Now, if you look at the videos and you have any questions, by the way, you can put your question on the comments. I'll read them and I'll respond to them. So if you don't understand something, you can add it in the comments. I mean, just ask. Okay? So as I'm going through it, usually because it's a channel, at the back, if you post a question, I'll be able to see it on my email. So I can just go in and respond to it without even going back to the video itself. I can respond to it right inside my email because it will just push it to my email. Then I decide if that comment is not responding to or not. I know there is all sorts of things that can happen on YouTube, but again, I'm not using it for purposes of how do you call it, driving traffic, right? So I'm using it for purposes of you guys learning. So probably it's only a few of you who have access to even the content itself. Okay? Yeah, so just feel free if you have any question. When you look at something and you feel like you've not understood something, just ask and I'll be able to respond to it inside there. Okay? Now, I had asked you guys to create GitHub repos and add me as a collaborator. My email was full, so I think probably that's why I was having an issue receiving those invitations. You can delete that invitation, then add it again. I think now I should be able to get it so that I can be able to accept it, so that now I'm able to view your individual work. You don't have to send it to me via email. I just be able to view it from the repo itself and mark it from there, and it becomes a permanent record for you, so that now in future if I need to refer to it, it's available, isn't it? On my email, I'll probably lose them, and now we have to figure out where it is and stuff like that. On your repo, unless you remove it, personally, I not remove it, but if you remove it, then now that becomes a problem. So I think GitHub does not have an issue with space, so you can store as much as possible, not a big deal. So that's where I would want us to have all this. Okay, excellent. So I think I'll leave it at that. If you have any issues, you will let me know. But for now, I'll let you practice subqueries, views, stored procedures. Those are the things that you're looking at, isn't it? Excellent. All right, thank you. You have the attendance, huh?